Hello everyone, I'm Steph Haynes, and this is the second part to my video tutorial explaining how I like to use the Nintendo Wii Remote with Mainstage or Ableton Live in my EWI performances. So first let me just say that I tried to make this tutorial as accessible as possible. If you already know a little bit about MIDI mapping and setting up virtual tools in Mainstage, then this might be a little bit slow for you, but please bear with me. I also just want to take a second and say that I really love this software. This is the software that I've been performing with the longest, and it's also the software that helped me conceptualize this whole crazy EWI rig. So without any further ado, let's get started. So here's a little template that I made. As you can see, I went into layout and I deleted pretty much everything except for the patch list and the virtual keyboard. I've got one channel strip with the ES2 soft synth loaded. So now we need to create a virtual version of our Wii Remote, and we'll start with the buttons. The Wii Remote has 10 buttons, but I don't usually use the directional buttons in Mainstage, so we'll just drag in 6 buttons. I like to arrange them in 2 columns of 3, but you should do whatever makes you happy. I also recommend labeling these buttons, so we'll do that down here at the bottom left by checking Add Hardware Label and then just writing a little label for each of them. We'll call this A, and we'll call this one B plus minus 1, 2. So now that we have virtual copies of all of our buttons, our next step is to assign a hardware input to each virtual button. This is super easy, but there's one really important step that we need to do first. Remember how I mentioned that Oscillator is always constantly sending out MIDI data for pitch and roll? Well, if we want to use the MIDI learn function in Mainstage, or Ableton for that matter, we have to go into Oscillator and make sure that the boxes for pitch and roll are unchecked. If we don't uncheck them, then any MIDI assignments that we try to make will be immediately overwritten by the motion control data, which is constantly being sent out by Oscillator. So I'll demonstrate the basic process for MIDI assigning with the A button first, and then you can go ahead and repeat the same process with every other button. It's super easy. First, we go into layout mode, which we're already in, and then we click on our virtual A button. After that, we're going to go to the top left over here and click on Assign so that it turns red. Once we've done that, we're going to find our actual real-life A button and hit that. Once you've done that, make sure that you click on Assign again so that it goes back to gray. At this point, you'll see that MIDI port, channel, type, number, and MIDI through have all been filled out automatically. If you're not sure what those do, don't worry about it. You can also go down here and change the color. Personally, I like red a lot. And you can also change the color of your labels as well. Alright, so maybe go ahead and pause the video for a sec while you repeat the same process with the other 5 buttons. So for the motion controls, let's drag 3 directional knobs onto our screen. These are going to represent roll to the left, roll to the right, and our pitch motion. Let's give them hardware labels really quick so we can remember what they do. So we're going to MIDI assign these pretty much the same way that we did with the buttons. I'll walk you through it, starting with roll left. First things first, let's go into Oscillator and make sure that roll is checked, but that pitch is unchecked. And then let's go back to Mainstage. We're going to click on the roll left knob, and then we're going to click Assign. So all these boxes should fill out automatically without us actually having to move the Wii Remote, because if you'll remember, Oscillator is constantly sending out accelerometer data. So let's just click Assign again so that it turns gray, and then we will select the roll right knob, and then we'll click Assign on that one. And the same thing will happen, all of the boxes will automatically fill out. So now that we have the roll input taken care of, now we have to do the pitch. So first things first, we gotta head over to Oscillator, uncheck roll, make sure that pitch is checked, and then we're going to click on our tilt parameter or our pitch, whichever you called it. We're gonna click Assign, and then that'll automatically fill out, and we'll hit Assign again. Quick tip, by the way, make sure that for all of these knobs, our type is set to absolute rather than single value. Sometimes it sets to single value, but if it does that, make sure that you change it to absolute, because then you'll get a more accurate reading from your Wii Remote. So if that's all working, let's talk about some ways that we're going to use these motion controls. I'm going to set up a tremolo effect really quick by clicking over here in the audio effects portion of my channel, going down to modulation, and then clicking on tremolo. I'm going to go into more detail on how I set this effect up in a future video. For now, I'm just going to load a preset that I made. So now that we have this plugin up and running, we need to make it communicate with our Wii Remote. Setting up these virtual knobs to control audio effects is super easy. We just have to click on the knob that we want to use, and then select Map Parameter, and then we need to go over here and click on the parameter that we want the knob to affect. So in this case, it's going to be rate on the left here. So I click that, and now you can see it's moving with the dial and with the movement of the Wii Remote. So now that we've done that, we need to adjust our parameter range so that we can gain a finer control over what happens when we move our Wii Remote. The range minimum and range maximum are going to be different for different effects, but for this one, we're going to make our range maximum DC, and we're going to make our range minimum 1/4. Now that we have that settled, we need to do some more fine-tuning. So click on the little box here that says Scale Parameter. When this little graph pops up, you can see that the position of our Wii Remote is represented by this little dot that travels up and down this line here. If you have the tremolo effect open, you can see exactly how that translates on our rate dial. As you can see, when we're holding the instrument in a neutral playing position, our little dot is more or less in the center of the graph. That means that our effect is currently being activated. We obviously don't want the effect to be activated until we turn the instrument to the left, so we're going to have to adjust this graph a little bit. Our goal is going to be to make the little dot sit at maximum range, DC, until we rotate the instrument. To do this, we're going to need to first click on Invert Range, and then we're going to need to take the top left side and we're going to have to drag it about 3/4 of the way to the right so that the graph looks like that. Now, our audio signal is passing through unaffected until we rotate the instrument enough to make the dot start to travel down the graph. So that's pretty good. But I sort of felt as though I had to turn the instrument a little bit too much to get the effect activated to begin with, so I'm just going to adjust the top of the graph over here. I can see that it's at 94 right now, so I'm going to bring it back a little bit, maybe to 90, and then I'm going to see how that feels. So that feels pretty comfortable, pretty natural, but if I want to change it in the future, all I need to do is adjust this graph. So you're going to want to follow the same process to set up audio effects with your other two knobs. Your graphs for the other knobs will probably end up looking pretty different, depending on how you need those audio effects to interpret the MIDI data. In future videos, I'll show you all of the audio effects that I use with the Wii Remote and exactly how I set them up. If that's something that you might be interested in, please subscribe. Of course, you can also use the buttons to activate effects as well. Just click on the button and then click Map Parameter the same way that you did with the knobs. I like to use the buttons to activate effects such as delay, arpeggiators, and note repeaters. It's a lot of fun, and it's also something that I'll be covering in future videos. That's it for this Mainstage tutorial video. I hope that everything made sense. Please toss me a like if you found this to be helpful or interesting, and stay tuned for more videos on my EWI rig. I promise that they won't all be this complicated.